and welcome to another great show, Everything Hollywood, with my friend Larry Namer. Hello, Larry.
Hey, it's good to be back here. It's always fun, and we've got some interesting, fun stuff to talk about, and some good guests and stuff. But it's been an interesting week in the news. I mean, one of one of the things that fascinates me, and I'm actually involved in to a degree, is the emergence of China over the last 10 years to become the number one movie market in the world.
Is that true now? Is that they've surpassed Hollywood?
They're now bigger than the U.S. in terms of movie markets. And
wow.
I think it just brings up all kinds of questions about, how that affects the industry in general. I mean, here you have this, communist regime that's very strict, and they don't like when you say anything bad about them. Does that affect the way movies are going to be written and cast and stuff? Do we have to have Chinese people in movies now? Do we have to have things that are only sympathetic to China? I mean, there's just a lot of questions there.
But Larry, before the pandemic, China was investing so much money into Hollywood, right? So is that a continuation of what's going on, or they pull the money from Hollywood, now they're investing only in their movies, or can you explain a little bit more on what's going on?
Sure. I think, at the very beginning, if you go back for the last decade, let's say, you found loads of Chinese money pouring into Hollywood, which is kind of been the way the history of Hollywood has been. There's always been, before the Chinese, it was the Russians were putting the money in. Before the Russians, it was the Arabs, the Japanese, etc. And, so there's always been that money flowing in from foreign countries because they wanted to learn about the business, and by investing in it, it was a good way for them to kind of put their toe in the water. So at the beginning, the Chinese were investing or giving money to Western companies to make movies. Sometimes not so smart. I mean, there was a lot of, while we talk about how China's ripped off a lot of Americans, I know a lot of stories about Americans that have ripped off the Chinese in those kind of deals, because they never really understood those deals. But what's happened is they've learned, and so now they're not so beholden on putting money into Western movies. They're now putting a lot of their money into movies that are written and created in China, that have more Chinese themes or even mainstream themes. But they're doing an awful lot. Animation, they've certainly caught up to us. And
so, but the people that are involved, like these Chinese movies, these are not Hollywood directors and actors going there, right? This is purely Chinese movies, correct? For the Chinese audience.
No, you're seeing a lot of that stuff, and where they're now creating movies for the world audience. I mean, they've learned a lot of, if you go to any of the big film schools, you go to USC or NYU, you see all these young folks coming out, and then, learning how to make movies that are global. So you're seeing them now, not just making a movie for China, although they are making some really good movies that are just for China, but things with, that have universal appeal that could play anywhere in the world. I mean, just look at, Disney with Mulan and things like that.
Yeah, but so that's kind of the part that I don't really understand, and maybe you can clarify. Now, I know Korean movies, a lot of great Korean movies that are
Academy Awards,
worldwide, and I watch them all the time. But Chinese movies, because they have such a huge population, right, that, it could be number one in China. That means they're making so much money. But are those movies playing in other countries? I mean, do they have a following in other countries?
You're beginning to see that. I think you saw it with the music business, where even just if you'll just look at China, it used to be the number one type of music in China was K-pop, followed by J-pop or Japanese pop, American movies, American music, then European, particularly Brit, and then Chinese music was like a distant fifth. It's now Chinese music is now number two there. So K-pop is number one. Chinese stuff, which is now, they found their own form. So it's original kind of stuff that's being created just for their market by people, who've grown up there. And it's different. It's not J-pop, it's not K-pop, it's China pop.
So there's more talent there, that's what you're saying, right? Because from what I understand, I'm going back a few years back, when they were investing heavily into Hollywood. And I remember, certain prominent producers were saying, look, yeah, they bring in the funding, but there's not a lot of talent out there. I mean, I don't know if they've cultivated more talent. Is that what's happening to make better films in China?
They've cultivated a lot of talent. And again, you go back and you look at the film schools, particularly in the U.S. and some in the U.K., and those kids that graduated 8 years ago now are 8 years into their careers, and they're doing some really stuff. I mean, just look at who won the best director this year, Chloe Zhang. I mean, she is Chinese. She's not an American Chinese person. And she did that did that movie that played globally, played incredibly well, and really does follow this universal popularity kind of formula.
Yeah, but the movie took place in America. It was in English. It was not a Chinese movie, correct?
Well, it was done by Chinese director and Chinese writers and and Chinese people. So I think more and more. I mean, we make movies in America that are not just about America. We do war movies around the world, and we do animations that could be in Africa. I think the one that's out now is all about Italy and stuff. So you're starting to see China really come in to become a force in the world market, not just the Chinese market.
Well, it's very interesting. It took them a while, but I know they've been working behind the scenes by investing in Hollywood, by investing in different talents to go to Hollywood, and now they're surpassing America to becoming the number one global producers of film. So that's great, and do you think they'll continue investing into Hollywood films, or they're pulling that back more now?
I think you got to question the term Hollywood films. Does Hollywood films mean that it's only made in Hollywood? And that's gone for years. I mean, there are more movies made in Georgia and Louisiana now than are made in Hollywood.
Well,
but I think it's a kind of movie.
Yeah.
It's the big, beautiful, rich type of movie, which has now got Hollywood with quotes around it.
Yeah, I know. By Hollywood, I mean, is the director an American director? The star is an American star. They always interject and bring in. Whenever they invest in movies, the Chinese, they always kind of make sure that you have, Chinese characters. Sometimes that works, and sometimes, in my opinion, that kind of feels kind of like forced a little bit because they've done the financing, and you see a character that is Chinese, and you're like, well, that doesn't really fit in the film, right? But we've had that happening. But my point is, do you think that they're pulling that back now? They're just sort of saying, okay, we learned enough from these Hollywood directors, producers, and actors. Now we're just going to concentrate on doing our own films, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the case. I think at the beginning you had a lot of naivete where the Chinese would invest in something and they would think that to make it a Chinese movie you needed to put in a Chinese character, a Chinese product. I mean, the greatest one to me was, if you watch the Iron Man, I mean, does anybody really believe that Iron Man drank Chinese milk? I doubt it. Yeah. But, they insisted that that's the only way they could make the movie a little bit Chinese.
Yeah.
But you're seeing that change. The business people behind the Chinese movie industry have become very global in their thinking. They're looking at how do we make movies that the world is going to see, that are going to make lots and lots of money. And there's a mixture of actors. But, it goes back to there's more to it. It's not just China. The complexity of the media business and the fact that it's become a world industry now.
Yeah.
The good movies are not just made here. I mean, you look at some of the stuff that's, with some great actors that are coming out of Africa or Europe or China or Japan and stuff. Korean movies winning Academy Awards. Everybody's become to realize it's a global business. It's no longer a U.S.-centric business.
Right. And I was just specifically, talking about Chinese talent and Chinese films, obviously. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's it's becoming a global business, and I'm glad to see that that's happening. But very, very interesting, Larry. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad that, I mean, they've put in a lot of money into Hollywood.
Yep.
And I don't know how much they've really gotten back. I don't know if they've really gotten all their money back, but maybe they were not looking to necessarily financially profit, but maybe to learn the business and to learn how Hollywood is doing business, because we obviously have some incredible talent, great directors, producers. So I think they came in to invest in that, right? And then learn from that.
Yeah, I think they measured return on their investment in a different way. I mean, we measure it just in terms of dollars.
Right.
They really look at it in terms, but first of all, a much longer period of time, but in learning that business in such a way so that they can be a creator of world-class visual entertainment, whether it be TV or film.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. We will be right back.
Start it up.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm having such a great time. Every time I'm here, Larry, I feel like I learned something new. What do you think?
No, that's good. I mean, you kind of started me off when you started talking about China. So now there's like a zillion Chinese things going.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. And the other thing that I was going to tell you, that I've been approached, with the music aspect, being a recording artist. And, I've had my music in China for many, many years, right? And just in the last 2 years that I've been able to sort of do my own thing as opposed to being tied to a record label. And so the last 2 albums have been released by my own label. And just yesterday, I had a really meaningful discussion with Sony Music China. They want to distribute and promote my material in China and the Chinese market, because being a pianist and somebody who's involved, and this is very interesting because they mentioned to me the fact that I'm a world artist, a classically trained pianist, and I do instrumental music, as you know, that is more friendly music. That Sony Music China is looking for artists that they wouldn't have any problems promoting, and they feel with my music that they're able to just go out there and, because it's melodic music, a lot of people listen to it, that they feel like they have a pretty good chance to, have a successful distribution, and they want to tie that into me doing concerts at the Opera House in Beijing, perhaps, and doing it that route. So I wanted to bring that up to you today, because interesting, I just talked to them yesterday, and I wanted to bring that up to you today and kind of get your thoughts on the future of American artists going and being distributed in China, and what are your takes on it?
Well, no, that's real interesting and stuff. And, I found by doing programming in China for the Chinese market, we've had to adapt certain things that we do, like in stories. If the story that I might have in the U.S. where a kid was talked back to his parents or grandparents, in China, that would be like a reality show, because it just doesn't happen. So we've had to modify scripts and the way people conducted themselves on the set. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about having to do that in China? Do you need to change the music, or is it just the same music you do anywhere else?
Well, the discussions that I'm having with them is, they would distribute my existing catalog, their last 2 albums, but moving forward, what they were hinting to me, that not so much directly, but they were saying, look, if you want to continue doing things, we would love to bring you in, and perhaps having some of the other well-known classically trained Chinese artists to become part of an album. So that basically what they were not pitching, but they were kind of bringing up to me in our discussions yesterday, look, we will push your existing material, but then we would love to have you do, let's say, a live concert at the Beijing Opera House, and then we would bring in, some of the well-known, Chinese artists to collaborate with you, and then make that into like an album, a live album kind of thing.
That stuff is a lot of fun. I mean, I looked at this a while back because a lot of people were looking, saying, because the Asian artists, particularly Chinese, are incredibly well versed in how to play classical music and stuff.
Yeah.
You go to any of the music schools, and it's just filled
Yeah.
with Asian kids. And so we were looking at, is China going to be a good place for like scoring films
Yeah.
and stuff? The technique was very, very far off, but you're seeing a lot of that now. And I think for you, I mean, from a creative point of view, when you start to really learn Chinese instruments and stuff, and how you could bring them into some of your stuff, you're going to get like an amazing different sound. And to make something popular in China, it's always great when you collaborate with somebody who's Chinese that they know there. And the whole thing of combining Western and Eastern together does incredibly well there. I would jump on it.
Yeah, I mean, on my last album, you know that I use the full-on symphony. It was recorded in Prague, but so what we would do is we would use a symphony in Beijing, for instance, and then all the musicians would be from there, and I would be composing the music and rehearsing with them, and then do a kind of a live, album that would also be recorded on a, in the old days you used to say DVDs. I don't know how you say it now, but making it into a live concert kind of thing. But that's what Sony Music China wanted to sort of get a feel from me if that's something I wanted to, get involved in. I said, yeah, I'm definitely open to talk about it.
I would definitely do it. I mean, like I say, there's so many cool new instruments there.
Yeah.
You go there that you can't believe that we've never heard.
Nice.
But, I mean, just look at the music that was used in Crouching Tiger and stuff like that, which was our first, or this generation's first real exposure to Chinese music and Chinese instruments. I mean, it was amazing. It was just so fresh and new. And I think you taking what you know about creating music for the world of music lovers, combine it with the Chinese and the Eastern take and those instruments that they have, I think you're going to have a great time and a lot of success.
Well, I'm glad you told me that. And I think the other thing that I was going to bring it up to you is the theme parks in China. There's a lot of theme parks. And another project that has been pitched to me by some of these theme parks in China, by my management team in China, they were saying that, look, there's a lot of theme parks that are opening in China, but they're looking for, for content.
Yep.
And a lot of the hologram kind of like immersive theater kind of thing that they're doing, that's really huge in China. And so actually one of their representatives are coming next week to meet with me and talk about it. So I wanted to get your take, and you think that that's something good to get involved with, first of all, for me, but then where do you see that? Do you think that some of that will be coming here in the U.S. as well, or how do you see the future
I
of
think
that?
for the next 10 years, you're looking at theme parks starting in China and just being in China and stuff. They don't have to. A lot of people have to bring something to the U.S. in order to make it successful, because we were the biggest media consuming market around. It's not the case anymore. So you just look in China. I mean, just put it in perspective. There are almost 4 times as many people in China as there are in the United States.
All right.
They are the largest group of travelers in the world. I mean, when you get Chinese holidays, I mean, literally 1 billion people move around China and stuff, and they take their kids to theme parks, particularly things that have a little bit of an educational bent, or do unbelievably well there. And so I think you'll see a lot of Chinese theme parks do really, really well and be competitive. I mean, now have Disney and Universal and stuff like that. And those would be fine, because Chinese are very interested in exploring things that are Western, but they're not so enamored by them that they will forsake things that are Chinese.
Yeah, very interesting. Lots of good stuff coming out, and I think it's going to open up the door for a lot of Western artists to be able to go there and create and do well, because I think if you're in the space, like myself, so one of the things that they were saying to me is, they're hesitant to bring in a lot of like people, rappers and people that are not necessarily is not going to pass, their censorship. And so the fact that I create instrumental music, it's something that they're definitely interested. But thank you, Larry, for sharing your thoughts, and we will welcome back, Larry. Let's talk about Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, it's we're getting actually close. It's going to be, I think it's August 5th is the kind of the anniversary of her death. I think it's 59th.
Yeah.
And what just amazes me is her popularity continues to grow. It's bigger now than ever, and you would think that Marilyn Monroe was just an American icon, but anywhere you go in the world, I mean, I do stuff in China. We're doing a TV show, and people are like, well, you're going to be covering the anniversary of Marilyn Monroe's death, and I'm like amazed that even in China they know who we are. So there's just all kinds of stuff that's floating around. I think, like I say, 59th anniversary of her death. I mean, the following year is going to be crazy, the 60th year, because they've got all kinds of stuff planned. But we're going to be doing some good stuff, I think.
Well, let me ask you, for you, somebody who recognizes talent, right? I mean, you built a whole network by bringing in amazing talents, right? So let me ask you, what do you see in Marilyn? Why do you think she is so popular, not just in this country, but worldwide? What do you think people love so much about her?
Well, I mean, first of all, she was great looking. But beyond that, she was, for that time, for a strong woman who knew who she was and what she wanted to do was unusual. So she was just this amazing force in the business. She wasn't being pushed around by the studio. She kind of set her own direction on a lot of stuff. And when you see her on screen, she was just one of those people that had it, that you turn the camera on and she just lit up the screen. She was a great dramatic actress. She was unbelievably comedic and stuff. And, then you take beyond her screen life and you just look at her personal life and the travails and the things she overcame and the people that try to take advantage of her and her kind of, overcoming much of that stuff. And the mystery. Then you look at it, it's like the death of John Kennedy. We still wonder about what their conspiracy theories and stuff like that. It's never really been settled as to what happened to Marilyn at the end. And it's the stuff of folklore.
And it also, do you think that's nostalgia of that time, that people could relate to that time, when she was doing her films?
Yeah, but her stuff, I mean, you watch her movies like, I'm a big Bus Stop fan.
Mm-hmm. Which I haven't seen, by the way. I need to see
Some
that.
Like It Hot and, movies like that. These are timeless.
One.
I mean, you watch her in those movies, she's kind of like what I consider almost, a Lucille Ball-like person whose stuff you could just watch over and over and over again, and you keep catching another nuance of it or something like that. She was just she was made for the screen.
So she was a very unique talent, right, at that time?
Yeah, unique talent. And then, you look at it, she married Joe DiMaggio, one of my favorite baseball players, the Yankee. The supposed affair with John F. Kennedy, with Robert F. Kennedy, with, theories that her death was from the Italian mafia or the, U.S. intelligence agencies and stuff like that. She was fascinating.
And she married Arthur Miller, my favorite playwright,
yep.
American playwright. So, yeah, definitely fascinating. So we are having a really special guest, Kate Rees Davies, who's doing, what is she doing? You could
I've known Kate for a while. Kate is, a great director. originally from the UK, living in LA now. And Kate has been developing and working on this project. It's like an 8-part series, you go mini series or limited series, about the life of Marilyn, particularly the 6 months before her death. And it takes a lot of liberties in terms of how it. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, so even though I know the end, I'm not going to say the end.
Yeah, right.
But it's just kind of a look at Marilyn the way nobody's really looked at Marilyn before. So I think it's going to do amazingly well, and you'll see it, on Netflix or Amazon or, one of the digital channels. But it should be amazing, and Kate's a great director, so.
I can't wait to hear what she has to say about the project.
Well, you don't have to wait that long. She's coming on in a few minutes.
Yes. I'm saying I can't wait to hear what she has to say. But anyway, thank you guys very, very much. And
stay with us, and you'll see Kate.
And you will see Kate in just a little bit. Hi, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you. Larry, please introduce our lovely guest for the day.
Sure, Kate Rees Davies. Been in the movie business for a while. We've known each other. We've been on panels together for years and stuff. So we're old buds. And even though Kate has this accent, she is in Los Angeles. And welcome, Kate. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited, and it's great to see you again, Larry. It's been a little while, and lovely to meet you, Omar, at last.
Thank you.
Reading about what you guys are doing. It's fantastic over there.
Yeah. So before we really get into your current project, give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, so I'm a director, producer, and writer, originally from the UK. I've been living now in Los Angeles for 12 years. I came here to study acting originally, and then transitioned into UCLA to study directing, which I loved dearly. That's really my passion, is directing. Looking to get my first episode of TV hopefully over the next 12 months. I've shadowed on TV shows. I've had a theatrical release with a feature that I directed in the US, which was fantastic. It's now playing on Amazon. And I've done several short films. I've produced heaps of stuff. A little short I produced is currently in Tribeca.
And so,
and I've had to play at Cannes.
Oh, you've actually, a lot of our audience are aspiring to get into the media or the entertainment world, and you use the term that I think we need to explain for our audience. When you say you have shadowed, what does that mean?
So you get to watch the director work. You are kind of like a shadow of that director. So I've done it a few times now. It's a great learning process, because you actually get to see how the day runs on set and how the director works with the actors and the rest of the crew and how the set is run. So I've shadowed Jill Soloway on Transparent, which was the big, very successful Amazon show based on her father's sort of life story loosely. I also shadowed Bruce Beresford, who's an Oscar-nominated director, and he was directing a film with Jane Fonda at the time in New York State, which was very exciting. I spent 3 days over there with them, which was really, really a lot of fun. So,
very cool. See, Omar, you learned something today.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what that was. I thought Larry is shadowing me on this show to learn everything that I do, but thank you for clarifying that, because I wasn't sure what that meant. Actually, before the show, I was asking Larry what that meant. So the fact that you clarified that. But what do you find rewarding about directing and producing? I mean, is that... So out of everything that you mentioned, is directing like your first love? Is that what you like to do?
It is, because you get to build and create the world, that the story takes place in. I love working with actors. Obviously, I'm an actor myself, and so I really feel like I can understand, and everybody's process is very different, especially when it comes to acting. People have their own process. But I can kind of understand actors because I am one. So, if I like to create an atmosphere on set where they can really explore and create that character and, bring their own nuances to it. And I do like to have some pre-work if we can, in rehearsal, so that we can really dig deep into that character and find out what makes that character tick. Do they have any kind of little quirks that make them unique? And the actor can actually bring themselves to that character, and embody it.
Oh, so, all right, let me ask you a question. So I'm just an absolute junkie of all the great stuff that's happening in the digital TV world, from Netflix to Amazon to Paramount and Disney. And, I hear a lot of people go, oh boy, TV is dead. And I'm going, no, it's not. It's never been better. So out of all the stuff that you've been seeing for, let's say, particularly through the pandemic where we've had a lot of time to watch, what series or show has impressed you the most where you watched it and said, wow, that directing was amazing?
Yeah, I think, my first choice right now in the last 12 months would definitely be The Queen's Gambit. I am a huge sort of history buff, and I love period dramas from any era. But if I could direct anything that was directed in the last 12 months, it would have been an episode of that show. I just think, the character was so complex. The whole tone of the show was so beautiful, and, to make a game like chess, which is a very strategic game, sexy, was really nice. And it really drew me in, and I always mark, if I'm not looking for stuff to criticize in a show, like continuity or something like that, then get lost in it, then I know that that's great writing, great directing, and a great story, and that's what I aspire to, is like these very complex characters. I love that, and I love exploring those worlds, what makes them tick. And the thing is, like, the writing has to be so good, because without the writing, we've got nothing really. You can't make a bad script good, no matter how brilliant a director you are. So, but story is really, really important.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. That was one of my favorites, between that and Ozark. I just thought Ozark was amazing. The writing, the directing, everything about it.
And a recent one, which I absolutely loved as well, was Halston, which was Ryan Murphy's camp, So really, really solid stuff coming out of Netflix at the minute. So yeah, there's been so much though this past year, because we've been on lockdown, and I've had that luxury to watch TV, which I normally don't get, but it's been a really fantastic year for me. I've developed 3 TV pilots. I've completed one, and are on various drafts of the other 2. But it's just been, having this time for me has just been a gift. I've really used it to my advantage.
Great. We hear you're working on this exciting, let's call it a limited series, or used to be called miniseries. Now they're limited series.
It is series,
but you're working on an 8-parter. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so the Marilyn Monroe story, basically, it's a kind of alternative history story. It's based on the last 6 months of her life, with an alternate ending. Basically, she doesn't die, she fakes her suicide and escapes Hollywood, because, she finds out that there's a hit on her life, because she's involved in affairs with the Kennedys. She knows a lot about the dealings of the mob and what's going on over there. She's fed up with the studios. She's sick and tired of them abusing her. And, she owes them one last movie. And, the only way out for her to kind of have some kind of calmness in her life is to literally leave Hollywood, and the only way that she can do that is through death. So it's a little bit like the Quentin Tarantino movie, where it has that alternate ending. Yeah. Which it's a fun, it's been fun to explore. The research that I've done is very, very extensive. And it's the world that I've created. It's, the 60s, it's hip, it's, 10 years, kind of like, the new Hollywood, where it's kind of going from the old studio system, and there's a lot of kind of excitement and hipness going on, and the cars, the music, the clothing, it's just been so wonderful to explore this period of time in 1962. So, yeah, and, it's what I've loved about this story, and I think the most that I've got from it is, we always see Marilyn being told from a male perspective, right? I don't think there's anything out there that has been written for TV by a woman. And look, there's great content out there. I'm not knocking that. I've loved a lot of the films that I've seen of Marilyn, but unfortunately, they do play her one way. She's kind of the sex symbol. She's the dumb blonde. And so I want to give her a little bit more than that, because she was a very, very strong woman, to get where she did in her career, to become this icon, that's not a weak person, that's somebody that is constantly fighting. So, and the comebacks, and yeah, she was a drug addict, she had an addiction problem, but the way that she was treated through that, we explore a little bit of that as well. And it is almost like, in my version, she becomes this kind of like superhero that outsmarts everybody, to escape unharmed, and to dodge death, So it's kind of like a bit of an action adventure kind of, it's sexy, it's fun, there's a lot of stuff going on in it, which, but obviously we see her dark side as well, and her demons, and, ex-lovers trying to control her, and her doctors trying to control her, and, but again, she knows what's happening, she is very, very bright.
Sure. What stage is the project in right now?
So the pilot is written. There needs to be a few more drafts of it, but it's in a pretty good shape. I've had some great notes so far. Things like, oh my God, the cadence and the tone and the speech of the time captures the essence, which has been really cool because, obviously I'm British, right? I'm not American. So, I've been listening to a lot of her tapes. I've been listening to a lot of interviews. I've tried to catch her cadence in some of the dialogue. I've been reading a lot of books about her. There's a great one called Fragments, which is basically all her letters, that were found after she passed away, which really kind of is her sort of inner monologue, you know, and her inner dialogue, and just questioning things, and, you know, and just this beautiful kind of insight into what she was feeling on a day-to-day basis as well, you know.
I find it really fascinating that you decided to have an alternate ending to this, because most people know how she passed away and really what happened to her. And kind of like you mentioned, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you know, it's interesting, when I was watching that movie, I just thought it's going to end one way. And when it ended differently, I was really surprised. So I think this is going to be really interesting, and you are taking an interesting take on the story. The fact, what made you give it an alternate ending? I mean, I find it very interesting, and I'm glad you're doing it. But
pause for 1 second. I think I just got it.
So I find it really interesting, the fact that you have an alternate ending for your story, kind of what you were referring to the Quentin Tarantino, having an alternate ending for his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So what was your thought process, and what made you decide to go that route, to have an alternate ending?
Well, it's interesting, you know, I've always kind of thought, you know, we never see any pictures of Marilyn dead, right? All we see is her being taken out on a gurney with a blanket over her head, face down on the bed, you know, with her hair, the back of her head. You know, this whole sort of secrecy surrounding the funeral, no celebrities allowed, no press allowed, you know, and all of this. And so that kind of, you know, started me thinking, wow, you know, what if it wasn't her? What if it was a body double, you know, and she did actually just leave Hollywood, you know, and just she'd had enough, and she was just sick and tired of it. And she kind of knew that, you know, being dead, she would probably be worth more than being alive. And as we know, that is true, because, you know, the estate has gone on to make billions of dollars, right? Her name and her, you know, all of the sort of paraphernalia that goes with her name. So that was very interesting to me. And then also, you know, she was a woman that was coming into sort of like her mid-30s at a time in Hollywood when that happened, you know, because she was seen a certain way. Where was she going to go in her career, right? And, you know, I think that because the studio sold her as this blonde bombshell sex symbol, how were they going to market her as anything else, right? And she kind of knew that. So it was more like, okay, I want to pay homage to this woman who is an icon for a start, and how, you know, how did she get that status, and explore that. And because, you know, blondes were a dime a dozen back in the 50s and 60s in Hollywood, right? Yet she became this iconic sort of figure, and a great actress. I mean, she was a genius, you know. When you watch her films, I mean, they're so entertaining, and she's just so engaging. So I just kind of wanted to pay a homage to her and give her the happy ending, you know. That's really kind of my take on it, is to flip the script of her being this crazy sort of, you know, no hope loser who just is an alcoholic drug addict, you know, to kind of really playing more on her strengths, you know.
Sure. When do you think the audience is going to get to see this, and where do you think they'll see it?
Well, you know, Netflix would be the perfect home. They do have a conflict right now because they're doing they're actually adapting a book into a movie about Marilyn Monroe. You know, but I think, you know, this could have any home really, but I think the way that Netflix operate, and they kind of give a little bit more freedom in their storytelling, it's like that would be a perfect home. And the other great thing about this story is it's not only for like women, right? There's all this kind of excitement with the Kennedys and the mob. So guys are really going to get like a big thrill out of watching this. And it's kind of like Mad Men, I don't know. It's kind of got that vibe about it, where there's a lot of guys kind of trying to orchestrate this woman's life, and she just really is having none of it, so she just manipulates and plays them to get what she wants.
Sure. Let's put you on the spot for a second. If you had to pick one Marilyn Project movie as your favorite, what is it?
Oh, my week with Marilyn, I think by far that is one of the most compelling stories I've seen. Michelle Williams is probably the best Marilyn I've ever seen portrayed on screen. She really captured the essence of her character. The story's great. Putting Marilyn outside of her comfort zone as well added a lot of layers to that story. Because she was going to London expecting to be this great sort of, serious actress, and she found out that, Laurence Olivier just saw her as the ditzy blonde, and was having none of it. So, yeah, very, very compelling, that one.
Sure. If you had to pick one of Marilyn's movies, and somebody who, let's say, doesn't really know Marilyn, you had to recommend one Marilyn movie, which movie would it be?
Oh God, it's a real toss up between Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot. I mean, those are my two favorites, and I think, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is like just the tip of the iceberg over if I have to pick one.
So as you were doing the research to write the screenplay, what are some of the things that you found out about Marilyn that perhaps you didn't know before you started on the project?
Yeah, I think it was actually, her strength that really came through on the research. The other thing which really surprised me was that she had an affair with Bobby Kennedy, and apparently was pregnant by him. But lost the baby. She'd had several abortions in her life. So, back then, plus she had like endometriosis, which is an inflammation of the womb, and the ovaries, which at that time people didn't really know an awful lot about. So it did make it difficult for her to, to actually carry a pregnancy. And just really, I think the amount of pills that she was taking, and mixed in with this champagne drinking and her connections to the mob as well. Like, I didn't realize that she was so connected to them.
And that was mostly through Peter Lawford, right? I mean, her connections with Peter Lawford and...
No, the studios.
Oh,
it was
studios.
actually, 20th Century Fox. Back then the unions were run by the mob. Johnny Rosselli was like the teamster, and back in the early day, they were extorting Hollywood for all this money, in Chicago. So yeah, it's a big history there. Like, and I love that. And I've always wanted to do a mob story, because I find it fascinating. So now I get the best of both worlds. And there's some great scenes in this one with the mob, like with Connor and all his gang, Frank Sinatra.
Should I let her know you're looking for a part to be in the mobster scene?
No. I don't want to be in that one.
Oh, I see you more as one of the 20th Century Fox, executives. I can totally see you smoking a big fat cigar.
I can do that. Whenever people tell me they want to write me into a movie, I only say only if I can be a Brooklyn gangster, because I can do that one really without acting. Anyway, Kate, this is wonderful to catch up with you. I think the last time we saw each other was probably at Sundance or someplace.
AFM, I think it was.
Yeah. That's right. I knew it was at one of those functions. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best on this project.
Thank you very much.
You for having me. I'm thrilled that I was able to chat about it. So you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Alrighty, bye.
Bye. Thank you.